Monday night bleeding into Tuesday morning. Thought I'd do one more, a fourth in a row, before I would go on a slight hiatus, I believe, before popping back with a vengeance probably 3 weeks from now. That sounds about right. Had an idea from last night in the shower. Admittedly, one of the shower thinkers for sure. I don't know what it is, but odds are if I have a good idea, two things are true. It happened between 11 p.m. and 2 in the morning, and it probably happened in the shower. The idea was a spin-off of Intervention, not necessarily a spin-off, but more so inspired by Intervention, where thought about this. No matter how great of an orator you are, or a leader you are, or colleague you are, sibling, parent, spouse, neighbor, it dawned on me, not for the first time, but for the first time in a while, that there are just certain people who don't hear certain voices. They hear it, but it doesn't register. And you'll watch someone who is a lesser than speaker, however you want to put it. They articulate their ideas either in a less convincing or less intense tone. And not even intense, but they might not even necessarily mean it with the same conviction that someone else does. But yet, to certain people, it just registers. And you see it all the time. You'll watch a boss give instructions to their employees, and it'll go in one ear, out the other, and yet you'll watch another employee next to him say, hey, just do this and this, and this is what they want done. And that registers right away. And you kind of see it across all relationships or working partnerships. I feel like there might be something there if you were to do an intervention style setting where, you get these like fractured coworker to coworker relationships or sibling relationships that aren't necessarily something catastrophic that happened, but one of those, little things, like one of those give and takes where it's death by 1,000 small cuts. Maybe it's a spouse who just will not do the dishes. Maybe their spouse asks them to and they just will not. But then, they'll have a friend say, I did the dishes for the family last night, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, now it's a great idea. And you see it all the time. And it's not just that. It's maybe you live somewhere cool. You got a friend whose neighbor takes it upon themselves to realize that, hey, I'm one of maybe two people on the block with the snowblower, and they snowblow the whole part of the street anyway, or their closest 3 or 4 houses to them, in exchange for, maybe a 6-pack of beer or a dinner every now and then. And then that idea gets relayed to said person who was vehemently against it beforehand, who now all of a sudden decides, well, actually, maybe I could try that. And I think it would be funny to see if you set up essentially this room full of people where maybe they do kind of like the lead up is someone taking intel on which voices or showing off which voices that person listens to. Because everybody just has those 2 to 3, maybe more voices in their life who, again, no matter how little conviction they put behind something, whatever they say, that's gospel to that person. And they're pretty unashamed about it. I think it would be really funny to get a room full of people, and yeah, maybe it's, it's a sibling to sibling relationship where, hey, I, love my sibling, but they just will not call me unless they need something. And they don't even realize it, but that's how it is. Or something like that. I feel like you could take it so many different directions. I actually kind of feel like it would be therapeutic and maybe make a lot of people step back and say, you know what? Maybe I could afford to listen to more than 2 or 3 different voices. And maybe when people address me by my name and say something to me, they actually mean what they say. They're not just talking to hear themselves talk. So because of that, I think it would be more effective and enjoyable to watch than an intervention, even though it's the same premise or setup. I always felt like watching those intervention shows was just hard because it was such an uphill battle. 99% of the time, there was no chance that the person was ever actually going to have some kind of, ending to their story that was in any way feel good or positive. It felt like almost everyone was, they got this person clean for 10 days and then they relapsed and overdosed in a hotel bathroom. And it's like, whew, that's just tough to watch over and over and over. Where this, I feel like you're not going to have a 100% success rate, which would be the fun of it too, because a lot of those shows are so scripted and they're only going to give you the result that they want the audience to see, even if they have to, manipulate things a little bit. So there wouldn't be that 100% success rate, so you could watch to see if the person, kind of opened themselves up to other voices talking to them and other messages getting through, or if they just kept themselves walled off, whether it be intentional or not. And then it would be kind of interesting, I think, for a lot of different people, for a lot of different reasons, see which voices in certain people's lives, and maybe a look into why those are the ones that they listen to above all else. I think it would be one of those that, for better or worse, early morning talk shows would eat up. They would go nuts. And I think it would open a lot of dialogue that just otherwise has no organic way to open up. You either have to be the evil person who brings it up and, why are you trying to start something? It could be anybody. It could be, again, coworker, sibling, neighbor, friend, spouse. So there's a lot of different ways you could take it. So that too would be fresh, where it's not, just labeled as, well, this is the nagging spouse show, or this is the needy sibling show. You could take it a different angle almost every episode, and then it would be interesting to see the different dynamics and personalities and how they're affected differently by those speaking to them and looking after, ideally, their best interests. So I feel like that would be a fun, original show, the likes of which we have not seen in quite a while. It doesn't seem like many shows have stuck. You still see Survivor on constantly, The Bachelor, The Bachelorette. Now there's, multiple spin-offs of that. The Voice. A lot of these shows, even American Ninja Warrior, a lot of these shows are over a decade old, or at least a decade removed from their premiere season. And you look around, and it's not for lack of trying. You do see new shows pop up every now and then, but none of them just seem to have the staying power of late. And I don't know. I feel like that one would have legs. I feel like there are just enough angles you could go with it, and it would be enough of a talking point to where people would be almost forced to sit down and see, like, what is this all about? What's the hype behind this? that being said, speaking of shows that, or a show that has staying power, I did get around to the first episode of Task tonight, and whoa, that one's promising. I like the format, first off, of an episode a week. I just feel like you don't get the time to digest episodes, and sometimes, in some cases, watch them back, because there are just certain shows and certain episodes where one watch is not enough. So it comes out Sunday nights on HBO, and the pilot episode, it was a nice, steady, slow build, and you kind of got around to seemingly all of the main characters anyway, or a number of them, and it got gut-wrenching. It was really well done. It was first show since Mayor of Easttown that put the Delco accent on full display, which is kind of fun to see. I don't know why that gets so overlooked, even though it's one of the more standout accents that you hear and see. And it was the first time Mark Ruffalo was in something that hit the mainstream in what feels like a while. And so far, he looks really good in it. I am definitely excited for episode 2 of that, especially with the way episode 1 ended. And staying on HBO, they put Friendship on there, I believe today for the first time. But that's on there, and I would highly recommend that one if you are a fan of anything Tim Robinson has ever done. It combines two of my favorite things, A24 and Tim Robinson. I've always been a fan of A24, even if I don't necessarily love a specific film. I love A24's willingness to stick its neck out and give projects a chance that most other production companies would not touch. And I would say on a wide scale, broad-stroked approach, those kinds of films and a company like A24 willing to put them in the spotlight when it's really easy to succumb to the cash grab of, like the superhero movies that maybe have exposed that I'm just the old guy yelling at people to get off his lawn. But I felt like when I grew up, in the era when I grew up, there was a certain lore and luster to those movies that just doesn't exist anymore, because it feels like a new one's coming out every 3 weeks. Where I remember the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man coming out, that felt like an event. It was like, it's not a matter of if you go see it, it's you're going to go see it, but when and how many times, that none of the new ones have. And, more power to them, but I don't know. They just don't do much for me, and maybe that's just me, and that's okay. But I do love when companies and production companies in particular, and directors and writers are willing to stray away from that and try something different. Even if it's terrible, I will always respect that, hey, they tried to do something different over just the easy, let's just go with what works. And not even necessarily that it works. It's that you look at some of the screens, when you look at the showings, there'll be a 12-screen theater, and 9 of them basically around the clock will just be showing those. And then you wonder why, wow, they broke this record and ticket sales on this are just unbelievable. It's like, well, if you just decided today I'm going to a movie and I can only really go to one that's this long, so it's got to start at this time, it's like a 75% chance that's going to be the one you pick anyway. And some people still do go to movies just in that sense, especially on, day like Tuesday. Most theaters around the country. They have some kind of deal on Tuesdays. And yeah, when that's your attitude towards it, that's probably what you're going to go to. So it wildly inflates some of the box office numbers that some of those do. And it just kind of feels like the creativity on some of those gets a little stunted, where a lot of the A24 projects, some of them are some of my all-time favorites. Others I'm not a huge fan of, but I still enjoyed watching just for the sense of I'm not sure what's going to happen. I was able to go into this blind, and I get to see where it goes without having any idea what's coming next. And that's hard to come by. But yet a lot of their films do that, even to the most avid movie watchers, and it doesn't matter which genre you lean towards, they seem to have something for everybody. So I do love A24, and then I'm a huge Tim Robinson fan. I actually think him and Saturday Night Live splitting was the best thing ever. Just because I feel like, not that he's overly crass, but he's said before that a lot of his skit ideas are canned Saturday Night Live skits, whether it be for time constraints or just being a little too raunchy for network television. Either way, it felt like his split with them, even for as good as he was on Saturday Night Live, kind of opened a Pandora's box of creativity and just really let him be him. Because, yeah, some of his skits have been hilarious. And he does not disappoint in Friendship. If you like Tim Robinson, you're going to love that movie. And Paul Rudd is every bit as good as he's probably been in any movie I can think of. I'm not a huge Paul Rudd fan. I don't mind him. I say that because I feel like I have zero bias when talking about his body of work. So because of that, I think it holds a little weight when I say this was one of his better performances. I don't think it's at all outlandish to say his performance was right there with his performances in movies like Wanderlust or This Is 40. So if you like Paul Rudd, you'll like it. Though I would say above all else, if you want to watch a movie that just leaves you staring at the opening or closing credits, saying to yourself, what did I just watch? But in an enjoyable sense, this is probably the one for you. Or even better yet, in the words of Tim Robinson, if you want to watch the movie and be left saying, what the hell? This would be the one.